Everybody, thank you for clicking on to this recorded episode of the American Doofus channel. We're going to be looking at mass shootings in the United States. But first, we are going to take a look at what's going on news-wise. With Vladimir Putin's troops, quote, escaping in disguise following a nuclear evacuation warning. We talked about this in the last episode. Russian troops sent to Ukraine to fight in Vladimir Putin's war have resorted to desperate means to escape the war-torn region after a nuclear evacuation warning was sent to locals. Russian soldiers joined civilians fleeing by escaping in disguise. This comes from online.com. And the troubles for Putin. Putin's Russian force escaping in disguise. The troubles continue as Putin's pictured with a nuke briefcase. This is moments before declaring real war with West. Now, this came yesterday on the 9th of May. As we said, normally in Russia, in Moscow, there is a massive parade on the 9th of May, marking Victory Day, the day that Russia defeated the Nazis in their eyes. And Vladimir picture with Russia's nuclear briefcase just moments before declaring real war against the West in a fiery and fury-filled speech. In a striking development to come more than 14 months after invading Ukraine, the 70-year-old Russian leader was spotted in Moscow on Tuesday with Russia's nuclear briefcase in tow. And that, of course, is necessary for deploying nuclear arms. Civilization again finds itself at a decisive critical moment, Putin said on Tuesday. A real war has been launched against our motherland. So in his eyes, he is not responsible for this, all because of the reaction that had to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. When I say people, specifically the United States. And we got some Trump news. If you hadn't heard, the jury sided with E. Jean Carroll yesterday in the civil rape trial against Donald Trump. And Carroll first came forward with her story in 2019. Has endured personal attacks from the now former president ever since. Here we go. In other court news with Republican leanings, George Santos, the congressman that played volleyball for a major college, he didn't really, but he has said all these things. He's been indicted by the Justice Department. He's in federal custody. He was taken in today on 13 counts, ranging from wire fraud, money laundering. A little bit something else from Russia. The moon landing was faked. Vladimir Putin's Space Force chief says the U.S. staged the landing, that we did not actually accomplish that. That is also something going around on the internet and has been for a while. This, hang on a second, I did not mean, pardon me. Let's get back to the news stories here. Donald Trump says sometimes a life of immorality and callous disregard for others can come back to harm you. Trump said this in a Washington Examiner article. We do not live in a just world. Sometimes crime pays. The book of Job shows us that the righteous sometimes suffer for their righteousness. American politics in particular seem to reward the worst among us the 2016 presidential election pitted Hillary Clinton, famous for her thirst for power, self-dealing, and disdain for anyone standing in her way, against Donald Trump, whose narcissism and infidelity had made him a celebrity decades before. So, what happens after Trump? Well, one of the possibilities is Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney releases a Trump January 6th attack ad aimed at the CNN town hall. That CNN town hall is coming up tonight. That will be on CNN, and we will be reporting on that tomorrow. Speaking of that town hall, I just Trump says that it may be a disaster. I just accidentally deleted that. I apologize. Trump says the town hall tonight may be a disaster. He's saying that because there are people that sorry. He's saying that because there are people that may come into this town hall and ask him some very uncomfortable questions, and CNN is is against him. Blah blah blah. If CNN's against him, why is he going on their channel? Just something to think about. Former Vice President Mike Pence is still licking boots. On Tuesday, he offered a mealy-mouthed response to questions about a jury finding Donald Trump liable for sexual abuse and defamation in the civil lawsuit brought against the former president by advice columnist E. Jean Carroll. In an interview with NBC News, 2024 candidate was asked if the verdict changed his own view on whether Trump, who launched his own campaign in November, was fit to serve as president again. I think that's a question for the American people. I really can't come to judgment in a civil case. I have no knowledge of those matters, and I'm sure the president will defend himself in that matter. Pence went on to say, just one more story focusing on my former running mate, and I know it is a great fascination for members of the national media, but I just don't think it's where the American people are focused. Again, ominous. And speaking of ominous, an ominous warning to the E. Jean Carroll jury. After many talks, the judge will dismiss the jurors by thanking them for their time and public words of gratitude are usually a formality. Judgment by peers in suits of common law. Federal Judge Lou Kaplan also offered a piece of practical advice to the Manhattan civil jury who had just found former President Donald Trump liable for sexually abusing E. Jean Carroll. Quote, now, not now, and not for a long time, Kaplan jurors that they may not want to publicly identify themselves. Quote, not now or not for a long time. Those words were jarring and yet seemed wise in Trump's habit of directing violence, threats, and general mayhem against the peaceful functioning of our democratic norms. By that, well, Trump has called the attorney that was working for him a Neanderthal because the guy lost the case. So that's what's happening new. We got it. That's what's happening news-wise, and there we go. That's what's happening news-wise. Now let's get to our features for this brief episode. And hang on here. Okay. There we go. That's what I'm wanting right there. All right. Before we get into the phrase, this is another story that I wanted to share with you real quick. This comes from Augustine Institute, and this is an interview, a segment of an interview.
I mean, the person I'm
correct.
This is an interview with an exorcist who has spoken to Satan himself.
You've had repeat customers in exorcisms, and I don't mean the person,
No.
I mean the demon.
Correct.
Through different people.
Right.
How do you recognize? Is it facial? Is it or is it patterns of speech, activities?
Sometimes it depends on the particular demon. So, in my own personal experience, anytime I've dealt with Satan, he always manifests the same way.
And by Satan, you mean like the kingpin, like Lucifer?
If you're talking about, it is generally there's kind of a severity, and it's actually kind of somewhat nondescript. He's the father of lies, so the way you primarily discern him is he just everything, even when it would go better for him, he's still going to lie. He's that wed to, yeah.
Wow.
Beelzebub, which is also another name for Satan, because there's the three, which I can tell you why that is. But Beelzebub, which is another name for Satan, we actually see that in Scripture, because Christ, they tell Christ, we think you're casting out demons by the power of Beelzebub, and then he just turns it and says, how can Satan cast out Satan? So he turns that, which is a revelatory to us that these are actually the same guy. The fathers of the church all say they're the same guy. They also say that Lucifer is the same guy. So Satan, Lucifer, and Beelzebub are the same guy. The interesting thing is though that they manifest very differently. So as I mentioned, Satan describes, but he's a habitual liar. But when you get to Beelzebub, he manifests in a very distinctive way in every case I've ever had him. Lucifer, on the other hand, will never manifest the same way in any case I've ever seen him, which I've seen him in about 4 or 5 cases. So you just never see him in the
just real shifty, kind of Loki-like, right?
Yes, exactly.
Always
part of it is that he is so basically the way it came out, which I've mentioned in conferences. It's actually in the priest version of the book. It's not in the lay version of the book. Is at a certain point I had Beelzebub in a case, and at a certain point during the session, God commanded him to tell me something, and he just looks at me and he says, "I'm the inversion of the Holy Ghost," and then boom, he checks out. I couldn't get him back.
Wow.
I'm like, what does that even mean? And I had known from my research and studies, and that 2 things. One is that exorcists say they differently, and so they actually thought they were different demons. And then, but the fathers of the church are very clear. Oh, no, he's the same guy. So I'm like, well, how does this work?
Lucifer, Beelzebub, and Satan are all the same guy. 3 expressions.
Yeah. So then I started asking Our Lady of Sorrows, what am I seeing, right? And then it just clicked. I think she gave me the grace. So in the next session, I referred to him as the 3rd personality of Satan. And all of a sudden, boom, he just stopped. He was stunned. And it was kind of one of those Hollywood couldn't produce kind of expressions. Yeah. He was stunned, fearful. Okay, now the gloves are coming off. The whole bit. I mean, it's just this whole complexion of things. And I said, trifurcation of your personality, the punishment for wanting to be God. And he wouldn't answer. So, yeah, usually if they're not going to say anything, that's true. Otherwise, he would just said no.
It's like my kids, Did you do it? Oh, silence is a yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So later he said yes, it was. And I said, wow. There is the 2nd personality of Satan, the inversion of Christ, who's light from light, because Lucifer means light bearer. And he said,
okay, yeah. If you want to watch all of this, it's on the Chris Stefanik show. Look that up. And if you want to watch the rest of this particular shorter installment, it's on Augustine Institute on YouTube. And we now go to a little bit of
something that would better travel solution.
A little bit of forgotten history. As we were doing that, I just played this commercial so that it would be commercial free, and I clicked back on, and here we go. A little forgotten history. This is from Highlight History, also on YouTube. This is America's worst school massacre, and this may be something that many of you have never heard about.
Sandy Hook, Virginia Tech, University of Texas, Stoneham. High, Polytechnique are names that will live in infamy, burned into our collective memories as sites of those seemingly modern violent acts, school shootings. The thought of our most vulnerable and innocent being senselessly slaughtered in a place of supposed safety and learning is a particularly abhorrent one, shaking our society to its very core. But while school shootings might seem like a uniquely modern phenomenon born of an era of social media and the 24-hour news cycle, the aforementioned massacres are neither the first nor of their kind ever committed in North America. That dubious honor belongs to a largely forgotten 1927 massacre that resulted in the deaths of 45 people, 38 schoolchildren. This is the tragic story of the Bath school disaster. Bath Township lies kilometers northeast of the city of Lansing in Clinton County, Michigan. In 1927, the township was home to the small unincorporated community of Bath, a population of 300 people. As with many small rural communities, for much of Bath's history, children's educational needs were served by a variety of local one-room schoolhouses. In 1922, however, residents voted to create the Bath Consolidated School District to serve the entire township. Consolidated opponents argued had many advantages over schoolhouses, particularly the dedicated school bus service. As Bath resident Montgomery J. Ellsworth wrote in 1927, "The children don't have to wade through the snow and mud. They are picked up at the door. A great many people appreciate not having their children playing along the road with rough children and standing a chance of being attacked by some lawless ruffian. The parents can feel that their children are safe from the time they leave the door to the time they are brought back, the bus drivers being selected from the most responsible men of the community who make application." Not everyone, however, was pleased with the decision, for in order to fund the construction, the township levied a school tax of $12.25 per $1,000 of property valuation. In 1923, the township acquired 5 acres of land to build an athletic field and built a dedicated electrical plant to power the school, further raising taxes to $19.80. Among the fiercest opponents of these increases was the villain of our story, 55-year-old farmer and electrician Andrew. Born in 1872 in Tecumseh, Michigan, Kehoe's early life was marred by tragedy and hardship. After graduating from high school, Kehoe studied engineering at Michigan State College in East Lansing and moved to St. Louis, Missouri to work as an electrician. Around 1910, Kehoe suffered a fall and sustained a severe head injury. According to his sister, J.R. Rose, Kehoe's recovery was long and difficult. Quote, "He was semi-conscious for nearly 2 months, and it seemed as if he never made a proper recovery. Added to that, about 4 years, he received a dangerous scalp wound while cutting down a tree on his farm." The first sign that the injury might have affected Kehoe's personality came in 1911, after his birth mother died and his father remarried to a much younger woman, Frances Wilder. On September the 17th, Wilder was attempting to light an oil-fueled stove when it suddenly exploded, engulfing her in flames. Kehoe watched his stepmother burn for several moments before dousing her with a bucket of water. However, as the fire was oil-based, the flames spread. Frances Wilder received third-degree burns over her entire body and died the next day. An investigation later revealed that the stove had been tampered with. Neighbors suspected Andrew Kehoe. The following year, Kehoe married Ellen Nellie Price, and in 1990, 325-acre farm outside the town of Bath. He soon developed a reputation around town as an eccentric, mercurial figure. Though outwardly generous and dependent, doing favors for his neighbors, Kehoe was also impatient, combative, and determined to get his way at any cost. For instance, Kehoe once shot a neighbor's dog that wandered onto his property and annoyed him with its barking, and beat one of his own horses to death because he felt it was being lazy. A frugal, almost miserly man, Kehoe went to extreme and often counterproductive lengths to save labor. Unlike his neighbors, Kehoe did little actual farming, instead spending endless hours tinkering with his tractor and other labor-saving machinery. He also used copious amounts of explosives to blow up stumps and rocks around his property, earning him the nickname the Dynamite Farmer. And when a new Catholic church town, Andrew and Nellie became regular attendees until, of course, they were asked to pay their $400 contribution to the church's construction. According to Montgomery Ellsworth, after some time, the priest went out to see why they didn't come to church or pay the assessment. Kehoe ordered him to the road and told him if he didn't get there, he would see that he got there. After that time, he church, and the neighbors said that he had never allowed his wife to go. It should therefore come as no surprise that Kehoe was particularly upset by the Bath Consolidated School Board's decision to raise school taxes from $12.25 to $19.80. At the time, Kehoe's property was valued at $10,000, meaning that his yearly tax liability rose to nearly $200, no small sum in the 1920s. In desperation, Kehoe ran for the local school board, being elected in 1924 as a trustee for 3 years and treasurer for one. Keogh clashed constantly with the other trustees, protesting that his taxes were too high, fighting any proposed increase in spending, and attempting to get the valuation of his property reduced. He was particularly belligerent towards the school superintendent, E.E. Hike, doing everything in his power to sideline or get rid of him. Whenever Keogh didn't get his way, he would make a motion to adjourn the meeting, even going so far as to deny Superintendent Hike a single week of summer vacation. More power and influence. In April 1926, Keogh ran for the position of school board clerk. By this time, however, his reputation had preceded him, and he was soundly defeated. And things only got worse. From 1926, Keogh learns that the holder of his mortgage, the widow of his uncle, had begun to foreclose on his property. Meanwhile, Keogh's wife, Nellie, had recently contracted tuberculosis and was frequently in and out of hospital, further straining the family's finances. Humiliated by his electoral defeat and facing financial ruin and the loss of his home, Andrew Keogh decided to take revenge on Bath and its 300 residents. The sheriff who served the foreclosure notice later recalled Keogh muttering, "If it hadn't been for that $200 school tax, I might have paid off this mortgage. If I can't live in that house, no one else will." It's not known exactly when Keogh started plotting his despicable act, but based on the timeline of events, preparations likely began in August of 19. The school board had hired Keogh to perform repairs on the school's lighting system, giving him free access to the building throughout the summer. Over the following months, Keogh accumulated more than 1,300 kilograms of dynamite and pyretol, an incendiary explosive commonly used by farmers for clearing debris. He bought small amounts from differing stores to avoid raising suspicion. He stashed explosives throughout the school's basement, wiring them to a homemade timer fashioned from an alarm clock. At the same time, Keogh set about preparing the destruction of his property and everything on it. He cut all his wire fence, hurdled his shade trees, and cut his grapevine plants, and then locked all of his equipment and draft animals in his tool shed and barn. A month before, Keogh had tried to give his best horse to his neighbor, a McMullen, but McMullen, noticing that his neighbor hadn't worked on his farm for nearly a year, suspected he was planning to commit suicide and gave the horse back. So Keogh destroyed the animals along with everything else, tying their legs together with wire to prevent them from escaping, and planting pyretol and dynamite bombs. Completing his preparations, he bought a bolt-action Winchester rifle and 1,000 rounds of ammunition, and packed up his pickup truck with explosives or shrapnel. All this activity went largely unnoticed until New Year's Eve 1926, when Keogh set off a large explosive charge on his property. When questioned, Keogh admitted that he was experimenting with homemade explosive timers. Another neighbor noticed Keogh carrying a large amount of equipment into the school at night, while yet another spotted the rifle and boxes of explosives in Keogh's truck. But whatever suspicions the residents of Bath might have had, none ever reported Keogh to the authorities. On the evening of May 16, 1927, 2 days before his planned attack, Keogh did something unusual and, in hindsight, chilling. As Montgomery Ellsworth wrote, Mrs. Blanche Hart, 5th grade teacher, called Mr. Keogh over the telephone and asked him if she could bring her class to his woods on Thursday for a picnic. It would be all right, and hung up. A short time afterwards, Keogh called her over the telephone and asked her if she couldn't just as well have her picnic on Tuesday, as it might rain on Thursday. I suppose children to have a little fun before he killed them. That same day, he was released from St. Lawrence Hospital in Lansing and returned home to the farm. Sometime between then and the bombing, Keogh murdered her, bludgeoning her to death and stashing her body in the chicken coop to burn along with everything else. The stage was finally set for Andrew Keogh's bloody revenge. On May the 18th, 9 classes for Bath Consolidated Schools, 236 students, began at 8:30 a.m. At 8:45, the alarm clock timer ran down to 0 and set off the explosives hidden in the basement. A massive explosion ripped through the school, demolishing an entire wing of the building and instantly killing 36 students and 6 staff. First grade teacher Bernie Sterling later recalled a scene of utter chaos. The air seemed to be full of children and flying desks and books. Children were tossed high in the air. Some were catapulted out of the building. At that same moment, Andrew Keogh detonated the explosives planted around his farm, instantly incinerating the property. Neighbors ran to the scene of the blaze and crawled through a broken farmhouse window to rescue anyone trapped inside. Finding no one, they salvaged whatever furniture they could before fire completely consumed the house. Then, as Montgomery Ellsworth recalled, Keogh came out of the smoke with his machine, a Ford pickup, and drove up even with where they were. He had a funnel in the gas tank. He stopped, it out, looked in, and picked up the cap and screwed it on. Keogh walked over where the men were. They were about ready to walk in the back door when Keogh said, "You are friends of mine. Don't go in there. Go down to the school." They turned and walked toward the road, and Keogh leisurely walked to the machine and drove toward Bath. He waved his hands. When he grinned, I could see both rows of his teeth.
A cell phone and an email machine all in one thing.
What do you call it?
There's one simple
human history to his hometown in New Jersey, where he would live with his mother and study the Bible. That would be until one day in 1949, when he picked up the Luger that he'd brought back from Germany as a keepsake, out upon a murderous rampage that would become known as the Walk of Death. Growing up, Howard Barton Unruh was said to be an shy and unremarkable boy. His 1939 high school yearbook, his ambition was to become a government employee. With the United States entering into 21-year-old Unruh's plans soon changed, with him enlisting into the United States Army on October 27, 1940.
Okay, I apologize. I forgot to turn myself back on there in the middle of that, between the two segments. The first thing we showed was an absolutely horrific event, blowing up a school in Bath, Michigan. If you want to watch that, go to that channel that I highlighted. This is the first mass shooting in United States history. Many people think that the first shooting occurred in Austin, Texas, at University, known as the Tower shooting. But this is, in fact, according to the Smithsonian Institute, the first mass shoot history. And it comes from a page called Well, I Never, a channel right here on, also on YouTube. And with that being said, let's get back to it.
Rampage that would become known as the Walk of Death. Growing up, Howard Barton Unruh was said to be an incredibly shy and unremarkable boy. His 1939 high school yearbook stating his ambition was to become a government employee. With the United States entering into World War II, 21-year-old Unruh's plans soon changed, with him enlisting into the Army on October 27, 1942. During his service, he became a gunner in the 342nd Armoured Field Artillery and participated in battles across Italy, France, Austria, Belgium, and of course Germany, all of which were considered to be the conflict's deadliest zones. For this, he received the Theatre of Operations Medal, the Victory Medal, and the Good Conduct Medal. Despite his stellar service, Unruh's section chief noted that he displayed a disturbing passion for guns and marksmanship, as well as for keeping killer's notes on the enemies that he killed on the battlefield. Unruh was honorably discharged after the war and returned to New Jersey, where his mother lived. His relationship with his family quickly deteriorated, with his younger brother Jim later claiming that his military service had changed him drastically. Unruh to enroll in the Temple University School of Pharmacy in Philadelphia. Dropping out just 1 month, he claimed that he found it difficult to adjust to life as a college due to his poor physical condition. He went back to New Jersey but failed to find employment. Living off his mother's meager income as a worker in a nearby soap factory, Unruh spent his days reading the Bible and pottering about the house. He also amassed a small collection of pistols, knives and bullets, and converted their basement into a target range where he frequently went to practice shooting. His actions unnerved his neighbors, in particular Morris Cohn and his family, who lived next door and owned a small drugstore located below the apartment building. They regarded Unruh as a religious nut that he hated and perceived to be derogatory. Comments like this only served to fuel his anger towards his neighbors. He complained that the Cohens frequently shortchanged him and that a shoemaker who lived in the block buried his trash too near there. His deteriorating relationships with his neighbors came to a head in the early morning of September 6, 1949, when Unruh, disappointed after a disastrous date with a man, arrived home to find that a fence that he had recently installed had been removed. It may have been a small and petty insult, but for him, it was the last straw in a long list of grievances that he had against the. According to Smithsonian Magazine, quote, for a couple of years, Unruh had been contemplating killing several of his Kramer Hill neighbors over petty squabbles, perceived slights, and name-calling, all of which fed into his psychosis. Unruh thought the world was out to get him, so he decided to enact revenge on his little. Unruh was awakened at around 7 a.m. by his mother, who had prepared him a breakfast and milk. In response, he held a wrench above her head threateningly, which caused her to flee to a neighbour's home. Frida Unruh would stay an hour later when gunshots rang out across the block. Fearing that her son was somehow involved in it, she reportedly fainted. Unfortunately, her mother's instinct wasn't wrong. After eating bread, had armed himself with a 6-inch knife and gas pen that contained 6 shells. He also encased a German Luger pistol that he secured with 2 clips and 33 loose cartridges, which he felt would be enough to kill his intended targets. Aside from the pharmacist Morris Cohen, he also planned Hoover and Taylor, Thomas Zagrino, and the shoemaker John Pilachik, all of whom were neighbours that he believed had been mocking him behind his back. With that, the 8-year-old Howard Unruh, dressed in a brown suit and heavily armed, walked out of his family's home and into the shoemaker's store, where he callously shot 27-year-old Pilachik twice while a young child hid behind the counter. He then went inside the barber shop next door, where 6-year-old Smith was sat on a hobby horse having his hair cut by Unruh's target, Clark Hoover. Unruh shot and killed them both. Upon exiting the barber shop, Unruh fired at a boy in a window and into a tavern located across the street, which was owned by Frank Engel. Fortunately, he missed both times. This did nothing to deter him, though. Unruh's main targets were the Cohens, and he headed to the drugstore where 45-year-old insurance salesman named James Hutton was exiting the establishment. Unruh asked Hutton to excuse him, but he didn't move fast enough for Unruh, who shot and killed him. Upon hearing the gunshots, the Cohens had attempted to flee to their upstairs apartment with 38-year-old Rose, putting their son, 12-year-old Charles, inside a closet before locking herself in an adjacent one. However, Unruh managed to gain access to the room they were hiding in and shot 3 times into the door of Rose's hiding place before opening the broken door and firing into her face. He also shot and killed her mother-in-law, 63-year-old Minnie, before confronting 40-year-old Morris on a porch roof, shooting him in the back, which caused him to fall to the pavement below. Death and the massacre of his family failed to quench Unruh's thirst for blood. He left the drugstore and walked out into the middle of the road, causing a passing car to slow for fear of hitting him. He walked up to the vehicle and shot at its driver, killing 24-year-old television repairman and war veteran Alvin Day. Unruh then to the tailor shop where he hoped to find Thomas Zagrino. Instead, he found Tom's wife, 28-year-old Helga Zagrino, who got down on her knees to beg for her life, but to no avail. He made his way to the local food store. Finding it locked, he shot inside but failed to hit anyone. Enraged, he made his way to a car, stopped at the intersection and shot its occupants, killing 37-year-old Helen Wilson and her 68-year-old mother, Emma Matlack. Helen's son, 9-year-old John, who had been sitting in the back seat, was injured too after a bullet in his neck. Unfortunately, his wounds were too severe and he later died in hospital. He then shot blindly at someone he thought he saw in an apartment window, the bullet instantly killing 2-year-old Thomas Hamilton. His caregiver, Irene Rice, collapsed upon witnessing the shooting and later being treated for a severe shock. He again shot at a car coming down the street, but the occupant managed to escape to a nearby tavern. By this point, Unruh was nearly out of ammunition and, hearing sirens in the distance, decided to call it a day. He broke into the home of 36-year-old Madeline Harry and her son, 60 Armand, both of whom he severely injured. He then retreated back to his own apartment, where he sat and waited as the police closed in. A gunfight ensued, during which a journalist by the name of Philip Buxton managed to find Unruh's phone number. He called it and Unruh answered. "Is this Howard?" "Yes. What's the last name of the party?" "Unruh." "What's the last name of the party you want?" "Unruh. I'm a friend and I want to know what they're doing to you." "They're not doing a damn thing to me, but I'm doing plenty to them." "How many have you killed?" "I don't know yet, because I haven't counted them. But it looks like a pretty good score." "Why are you killing people?" "I don't know. I can't answer that yet. I'm too busy." At that point, Buxton heard Unruh move away from the phone as gunfire was heard in the background. "I'll have to talk to you later. A couple of friends are coming to get me." At the time, no standard police protocol had been put in place for dealing with this kind of situation, leading the authorities to haphazardly fire at Unruh's apartment building using a combination of machine guns, shotguns and pistols. They also threw 2 tear gas canisters into the complex, which forced him to surrender. 2 armed officers entering the building, shouting to Unruh to come down with his hands up. He replied, "I give up, don't shoot," and with that he fell down the stairs, landing at the officers' feet. As he was patted down and cuffed by police officers, one asked him if he was a psychopath. In response, Unruh calmly said, quote, "I am no psycho, I have a good mind." But the killing spree that he had just committed seemed to say otherwise. In the space of 20 minutes, Howard Unruh had killed 13 people and severely injured 4, in what has come to be known as the Walk of Death. During his interrogation, Unruh reportedly admitted to the killings and even supplied the authorities with helpful details. His interview was cut short though when blood was found on his seat. He had received a bullet wound either from the shootout with the police or when one bomb turned fire during his rampage. Unruh was treated for his wound, then voluntarily transferred to Trenton Psychiatric Hospital, where he was placed in the ward reserved for criminally insane patients. The following weeks would see him interviewed by teams of psychiatrists, all of whom attempted to understand why an otherwise unremarkable war veteran had embarked on a killing spree. Their reports were concealed from the public eye and were only released half a century later in 2012. According to Smithsonian Magazine, quote, "He cold-bloodedly explained everything, listing the neighbors who had wronged him and describing each murder with little emotion. He claimed to feel sorrow for the children he'd killed, but the doctor's notes indicate he didn't seem remorseful. Unruh went so far that murder is a sin and I should get the chair." He would never face the electric chair or time in prison. Instead, psychologists diagnosed him as suffering with paranoid schizophrenia and found him to be criminally insane. October 20th, 1949, a judge signed an order of commitment based on the diagnosis. Unruh was interned at Trenton Psychiatric Hospital with his father, Sam, paying the required fee of $15 a month for his upkeep. He was also regularly visited by his mother, Frida, until she passed away in 1985. In 1993, an elderly Unruh was transferred to the facility's geriatric unit, which had fewer restrictions. He lived out his days there and died at age 88 on October 19th, 2009, 60 years after his tragic walk of death. His last public words while being interviewed by a psychologist were, "I'd have killed 1,000 if I had enough bullets." Many contemporary experts believe that Unruh's diagnosis was a farce and that he would have been found legally sane had he committed his killing spree today. Regardless of whether he was genuinely insane, Howard Unruh's actions on the morning of September 6, 1949 were a dark foreshadowing of the tragic mass shootings that would plague America in years to come. In a strange twist of fate, in 2018, student Carly Nobel survived a mass shooting at her Parkland High School by hiding in a closet. Her grandfather was none other than Charles Cohen, the boy who had survived Unruh's rampage by also hiding in a closet many years earlier. And that, ladies and gentlemen,
again, that was the first mass shooting in modern U.S. history. Many people do not know about it. Many people claim that the first mass shooting was in Austin, Texas, at the campus there, known as the Tower shooting. But we had them before, and we have them way too often now. This is just a reminder of our mass shootings in the United States, and a reminder that for far too long we've been in the circle of just trying to hope it never happens again without doing anything about it. And with that being said, this is from Watch Mojo, and this is the 10 most infamous mass shootings in the United States.
went. Following a police chase and shootout, he committed suicide, and while he left behind a list of people who had done him wrong, his reason for killing was never established. Number 9. The 2011 Tucson shooting. U.S. Representative Gabrielle Giffords and some constituents were gathered in a grocery store parking lot when Jared Lee Loughner pulled out his gun. Among those killed were a federal judge, one of Giffords' employees, and a 9-year-old girl. Giffords herself was also shot at point-blank range, and while she was listed as critical, she pulled through and made a truly inspiring recovery. Number 8. The Beltway sniper attacks. John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo taunted police and held Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia hostage by randomly shooting unsuspecting citizens from long distances.
Nothing like this has ever happened in Montgomery County. This is a very safe community. Our homicide rate just increased by 25% in one day.
The pair was finally caught after intense news coverage 3 weeks later, and the rumored motive was Muhammad's anger at his ex-wife. While that proven, Muhammad was executed in 2009, and Malvo is serving 6 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Number 7. Fort Hood shooting. This Texas spree was the worst shooting ever on an American military base. The accused was Army psychiatrist Major Nidal Malik Hassan, whose apparent belief in radical Islam, suspected al-Qaeda ties, and alleged anger at the supposed war crimes of recently deployed soldiers he treated were tapped as possible. While he was paralyzed in the event, his trial was repeated by his refusal to shave his beard based on religious beliefs. Number 6. Tower shooting at the University of Texas at Austin. After killing his wife and mother, former Marine Charles Whitman climbed the university's clock tower and inflicted almost 2 hours of panic upon the area by randomly shooting passers-by.
This is a KLRN News Bulletin. A sniper with a high-powered rifle has taken up a position on the station deck of the tower on the campus of the University of Texas.
His reign of terror ended when he was shot by a cop, and during his autopsy, he was found to have a fatal brain tumor that might have been the cause of his rage. Number 5. San Isidro McDonald's massacre. Police procedure was never the same once this Mexico border town was hit by the bloody rampage of a man who said he was hunting humans. James Oliver Huberty killed 22 people, ranging from 8 months to 74 years old, before he was downed by a sniper's bullet inside McDonald's. Huberty's wife later unsuccessfully attempted to sue the restaurant chain by claiming their chicken McNuggets led to her husband's psychosis. Number 4. 2012 Aurora shooting. During a midnight premiere of The Dark Knight Rises, James Egan Holmes caused panic with tear gas, killing 12 and injuring 58. Cops were on site within a minute and a half, and Holmes was apprehended soon after, but the damage was done. A gag order prevented his motive from being immediately made public, but rumors swirled that he referred to himself as the Joker. Number 3. Luby's Massacre. In the deadliest U.S. shooting before 2007, George Hennard drove through the window of a Killeen, Texas diner and opened fire. Anger towards women and frustration over losing his job might have been contributing factors, though his motive was never established. Survivor Susanna Hupp later lobbied heavily for concealed weapons laws as a member of the Texas House of Representatives, based on her experience that day.
I've been sitting here getting fed up with all of this talk about these pieces of machinery having no legitimate sporting purpose, no legitimate hunting purpose. People, that is not the point of the Second Amendment.
Number 2. The Virginia Tech Massacre. Virginia was a gun-free zone when South Korean national Sung Hee-cho began targeting what he called rich kids, debauchery, and deceitful charlatans with gunfire. Despite tales of teachers and students sacrificing themselves for others, this was still the deadliest shooting by a lone gunman in U.S. history, and it ended when the shooter took his own life. In the wake of this tragedy, school security countrywide increased. Number 1. The Columbine High School Massacre. Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris planned to use guns and homemade bombs to cause anarchy at their Littleton, Colorado school. The bombing, but Columbine was still one of the deadliest ever American school shootings. Images from that day continue to haunt us, and the massacre was blamed on bullying, violent movies and video games, goth culture, and even Marilyn Manson. But the shooter's suicides make the motive even tougher to decipher. Massacres improved law enforcement's responses to similar circumstances and reminded us that, without acknowledging our past, we are destined to repeat it. Check out more historic.
I want to end it right there with that line. While we ignore if we ignore our past, we are destined to repeat it. Are we doing that? Are we ignoring our past? 10 infamous mass shootings. Now, this is from 10 years ago, okay? So there have been more, significantly more, since that time that this was first put out. I chose this because it went back and might remind some of what has happened in our past. I'm a spiritual person. I believe in the power of prayer. I believe in positive thoughts, positive energy, positive vibrations. However, if you're a politician and the only thing you can offer is thoughts and prayers and not solutions, you're not doing your job. Something to think about. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be live tomorrow night. We will have game night, and I hope you will be with me. Once again, thanks for clicking on this recorded edition, and I hope you have a pleasant evening, and we'll see you next time.